So the US government is partially shut down again. Who could have seen that coming? And guess what the Trump administration's latest brilliant idea is? Deny hungry families their SNAP food stamp benefits, at least for November. Because government shutdown means no money for food, they proclaim, as kids scrounge in empty pantries and veterans skip meals. Seriously, come on, really? Host, is this what we make America great again looks like? Starving our seniors and veterans while insisting there's no money even though Congress specifically approved funds for emergencies? If you're asking yourself, wait, is this reality or some dystopian parody? You're not alone. It was reality. 42 million Americans, 1 in 8 of us, rely on SNAP to put food on the table, tiny benefits of $150, $500 a month to feed a family. And amid a completely preventable government shutdown in November 2025, the Trump administration initially said, no SNAP money for you. They claimed shutdown equals no funding. Never mind that Congress had already set aside billions to keep programs like SNAP running in a temporary funding gap. Cue the outrage. Farmers, governors, courts, everyone was like, dude, really? The result, a legal circus culminating in a series of court orders forcing the White House to issue the food stamps after all. Finally, just before millions of families would go hungry, 100% of SNAP benefits were reinstated, but not without throwing a tantrum worthy of a reality TV finale. Let's break down the timeline of this absurdity, drop some truth on the hypocrisy, and ask the questions the Trump administration desperately hopes we won't. Why did it take courts to get kids some food? Why are hungry Americans bartering health and dignity because of a political stunt? And who exactly is paying the price? Remember why we were in this mess? The same way the world ends isn't with a bang, but with Congress refusing to fund it. In the fall of 2025, Republicans in Congress refused to pass a funding bill, triggering another federal government shutdown. Most non-essential services stop. Our economy teeters. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers go without pay. And what did the Trump administration focus on during this meltdown? Arguing that contingency funds for food aid aren't actually for feeding people. Initially, the USDA announced SNAP would not be funded for November due to lack of appropriations. Cue the media headlines. Trump asks Supreme Court to allow withholding $4B in food aid. Imagine the pitch. Should we let poor kids and seniors go hungry during a shutdown? Or maybe let's see which court is more tired. The Department of Justice even pleaded to the Supreme Court that delivering food was too hard during a shutdown, effectively asking judges to put a moratorium on meals. The DOJ argued that paying out SNAP from already appropriated funds would be an unconstitutional reshuffling. Yikes. That's the administration's position. It's unconstitutional for the White House to actually use money Congress gave it to feed people on purpose. States and activists who meet the SNAP heroes. Not everyone took this lying down. On the 30th of October 2025, a coalition of states, cities, nonprofits, and activists jumped into action. Led by Democracy Forward and allies, they sued the Trump administration in federal court, crying foul. The complaint was scathing: the administration's refusal to use available funds and the sudden termination of food assistance waivers would cut off essential food support to more than 42 million people, including children, seniors, and veterans. It warned of immediate and irreparable harm. Families skipping meals, food pantries swamped, even local businesses, corner stores depend on SNAP purchases, taking a hit. In short, if Trump gets away with this, millions go hungry in Thanksgiving week. And that's the latest political ploy, said the lawsuit. It wasn't about policy, it was cruel politics. Enter Rhode Island U.S. District Judge John J. McConnell Jr., an Obama appointee, and another judge in Pennsylvania, Both were not amused. Within days, two federal courts ruled that the Trump administration must continue funding SNAP using contingency funds Congress had explicitly set aside. Judge McConnell's November 6 order was epic. He flatly rejected the administration's plan to pay only 65% of benefits, which would have left millions with nothing for the month. He noted the USDA was sitting on a $4.6 billion reserve for emergencies and told them to use it for hungry Americans. Bluntly, he accused the administration of withholding SNAP for political reasons. At the same time, a Pennsylvania judge said pretty much the same. No skipping beneficiaries because you want to squeeze Congress. These judges weren't shy about calling out the cruelty. Governor Josh Shapiro later echoed them, saying Trump's refusal was another exercise in cruelty and vowing to help food banks fill the gap. So by Oct 31 of 1, everyone from NJ to Washington State was preparing for hungry people while court orders were lining up against the White House. Cover 28 and 22 other states file a lawsuit represented by Democracy Forward seeking to force the Trump administration to fund SNAP. October 30, Democracy Forward files in Rhode Island. A nationwide coalition sues USDA and RI challenging the suspension of SNAP. Guess who was named defendant? The USDA secretary under Trump Vance, a Vance administration we allegedly weren't in yet. October 31, two federal courts, RI and PA, ruled the government must use contingency funds to keep SNAP running. This is using existing law. SNAP law says contingency funds shall be used during funding gaps, a policy Trump's team had abruptly reversed. November 1, without SNAP credits on cards for the first time in 60 years, worried families and pantries brace for chaos. Food banks report frantic demand. People who barely made it before can't make it now. November 4, Judge McConnell formally orders USDA to replace the full month's benefits using the emergency reserve plus a separate $23 3B Child Nutrition Fund. He rejects only giving 65%. November 6, Pennsylvania Judge Perry also forces full funding. Several more states announce plans to tap reserves or issue emergency meals as needed. November 7 in the morning, the First Circuit Court of Appeals unanimously denies Trump administration's request for an administrative stay of McConnell's order. 3 Dem-appointed judges say they'll rule on the emergency appeal as quickly as possible. November 7 at noon, USDA suddenly emails all states saying good news, funds will be made available to fully fund November SNAP benefits after all. This comes just hours before the Supreme Court could issue an order. Confusion reigns. The administration still wanted to appeal, but USDA told states to move forward. November 7 at evening, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson of SCOTUS issues a 1-week administrative stay emergency hold on the order to pause full funding until November 10. So for now, roughly $4B SNAP benefits hang in limbo, but lower courts have been ordered to decide by Tuesday. November 8, states begin issuing full benefits. Massachusetts and others announced SNAP payments are being processed in full for November. Each day, the story changed. DOJ lawyers told the Supreme Court that paying out SNAP was unconstitutional without Congress voting again, while state AGs and officials thundered that the White House was blatantly ignoring food stamps law. Democracy Forward's Sky Perryman noted courts had already been clear Trump must pay these benefits since Congress had authorized the money. The result, the administration briefly held meals hostage, only legal action forced compliance. At time of writing, SNAP benefits are being dispersed, but recall, Congress had provided these funds for just this exact scenario. We'll circle back to that absurdity. State leaders call BS and help feed people. It wasn't just judges. Governors from Democrats to even some Republicans publicly slammed the move, then raced to cover the gap. Gov. Josh Shapiro, VA, blasted the Trump-Vance administration for this exercise in cruelty. He declared a state emergency, freed $5 million in PA funds for food banks, launched a private SNAP emergency relief fund, and joined other states in suing Trump. Not only is President Trump harming people who are hungry, he is harming Pennsylvania farmers. We should be doing everything we can to feed Pennsylvanians and not making excuses, Shapiro said. Gov. Maura Healey said flatly, President Trump should never have put the American people in this position. She too was part of the state's coalition. Gov. Maura California Newsom, all the way from the West Coast, cheered the court order, saying the Trump admin's tactics treated Americans' well-being as pawns in their sick political game. California was in the 23-state lawsuit. GOP voices, even a few Republicans, some in Congress or governors, grumbled about forcing seniors to live without their benefits, but mostly silence or spin from them, as this was essentially Trump versus Bernie. Meanwhile, families and charities scrambled. Food pantries reported scared faces and longer lines of new clients. Eating Pennsylvania CEO Julie Bancroft noted some families had $30 left after October SNAP to stretch through holidays. Federal workers already furloughed now had to decide between groceries and gas. One student testified she had to save $30 of $400 monthly to survive without SNAP. Stories like these underscore this is real people's lives, not just policy. It's worth highlighting a key human stat. SNAP typically provides $366 million per month in PA alone, supporting a quarter of the population. Nationwide, about 42 million Americans get SNAP. Even a week's delay means billions of dollars missing from grocery bills, groceries rotting away in pantries, and children wondering where dinner is coming from. New low for the Trump apologists, blame everyone else. By early November, the Trump administration narrative unraveled. First, they said we have to pause all payments, no money until government funded. Then, when judges said nope, illegal, they offered to pay only 65%, still screwing over tens of millions. After being struck down, they suddenly discovered they could indeed use Congress-approved reserves and said they'd work to comply. Ironically, after states already started paying out, all the while demanding the courts bend to them and accusing courts of creating chaos by judicial fiat if SNAP goes out. Justice Depp's argument, via Solicitor General John Sauer, was yes, it's a crisis, but that crisis is caused by Congress's failure. Only Congress can fix it. As if the president has no obligation to uphold what Congress did, it's bureaucratic quantum gymnastics. This from the same folks whose entire policy relies on Congress supposedly knowing and approving of everything they do. Meanwhile, their own spokespeople were talking in circles. In the same breath, DOJ told the appeals court it had no choice but to obey the funding law because it's automatic statutorily mandated. But in the next breath, it begged SCOTUS to freeze that requirement. And the USDA itself, charged with nutrition, was publicly telling states on Friday it was working to comply and make full SNAP payments, even as the White House lawyers were appealing the judge's order. Cue the obvious question, wait, what are we appealing as here? The USDA memo itself said to comply. Senators literally started negotiating bills to pay SNAP and other bills, because obviously Congress eventually has to solve the shutdown by coming back to work. But at the 11th hour, the courts had done their job first. The outrage is real. From coast to coast, leaders voiced fury. In Washington, D.C., fast-track relief was promised if a deal happened. Across the country, Democrats used sharp words. Trump continues to create harm through self-inflicted wounds, caught in the crossfire. MA Senate Minority Leader Jay Costa calls and emails flooded his office with constituents fearful they will not be able to stock their pantries because of the heartless decision of the president and his enablers. And local officials, like city council members from big cities, declared this heartless or cruel. Even many Republicans publicly defended SNAP, though privately quite a few stayed muted. The coalition suing included some GOP-led cities like Albuquerque, but overall, it was a rare bipartisan and nonpartisan rebuke of the Trump White House's tactics. The Trump team even faced criticism on the normally sycophantic until he dared to defy orders side, for example. Vice President in waiting, Mark Meadows, if still around, would have had to explain cuts to constituents. The bigger picture, Trump had taken a 2023 playbook, shutdown equals negotiating leverage, and applied it mercilessly to the poorest Americans. It was a slap in the face to veterans, to seniors, to children and working families. Consider a veteran on disability relying on a $250 stamp. For them, a 30-day cut in supply could mean malnutrition or homelessness. But to the administration, apparently they were just fodder in a political game. So we should ask ourselves, are we okay with running society this way, using hunger as a bargaining chip, gaslighting about no money when there is money? It's hypocrisy on parade. Hypocrisy, privilege, and political gaslighting. Let's talk hypocrisy. The richest man on earth, Donald Trump, presiding over the nation, claiming he cannot find a few $1 billion, literally pocket change for the federal budget to feed the poor because whistle government is locked down. And furthermore, telling judges that Congress never intended those funds to be used. We know the truth. Congress passed an Appropriations Act this summer with billions for exactly this scenario, emergency contingency, SNAP funds. Every budget blueprint for the USDA included that pot. Until this administration, every shutdown had used it to pay SNAP. The Trump legal justification hinged on creative constitutional parsing. You can't use contingency funds without separate appropriation. This was immediately called out as bogus by legal experts. Even older Republicans like Mitt Romney in 2013 pointed out that if federal workers go unpaid, we still pay other things. Paying people is just business, not discretionary. The same applies to SNAP. Meanwhile, Donald Trump himself spent tens of millions on golf and vacations while advocating for big tax cuts for the wealthy, but no money for food aid. Apparently that's where he draws the line. If you think that's not double standards, feel free to buy a bridge. He's perfectly happy spending on courthouses, Secret Service, or the Space Force, but meals, that's only for patriots. Patriotism now equals, I don't need government food, is the attitude. Then there's the PR spin. Trump blamed it all on Democrats and congressional bungling. Send Biden's team not involved in these fights. The appeal quoted congressional failure, ignoring that right now Congress is deadlocked over Trump's demands, not some imaginary Democratic Congress. It's pure gaslighting to say, this famine is not my fault, blame Congress. The very same Congress whose votes will pay the bill was fighting with him. In fact, part of negotiating a shutdown deal was likely passing a continuing resolution, which could have included SNAP. They just refused to do it. And fiscal responsibility, label flying. If they truly cared about the budget, SNAP contingency funds are already approved. It costs the same whether we pay now or later. Delaying benefits will cost more later, longer unemployment, more food bank strain. But we heard nothing from them about cutting NASA or sports stadium subsidies, only SNAP. This whole drama shines a harsh light on elite privilege. Imagine if families of millionaires suddenly weren't paid 1 month because government shut down. The outrage would be immediate. But this being so-called food stamps, which are mostly used by working poor, disabled kids, the Washington crowd shrugged and delayed action. That contrast to kids versus corporate profits tells you whose needs come first in this administration. As Skewer quoting CNN's analyst pointed out, everyone's had a historically bad week in court, but who's really hurting? The judges involved or the judges of public opinion, the faces at food pantries in line. Every lawyer chuckling about constitutional law should remember law exists to serve the people. Judges from Obama to Trump era kept saying the law is to pay SNAP. This is literally statutory war on poor people and simple human dignity. Let's be blunt. At its heart, this was a decision to let hungry Americans suffer a fight over pennies between politicians. Meanwhile, the very people suffering might be our grandparents, neighbors, kids, or ourselves soon. Think about the human side. Children going to bed hungry for a week because someone couldn't swallow his pride. Veterans, after risking everything for the country, forced to choose between bills and feeding their families. Working mothers who budget every dime, now hit with a bill they didn't see coming. Every single person on SNAP is surviving on razor-thin margins, just one paycheck away from crisis. A month without it, that's eviction, that's eating rocks. The humane response from governors will cover you. More than a dozen states rushed to feed their people with state funds or food drives. PA spent $5M on food banks. Others did similar. But this was holding a gun to the head of states. If you pay for our politically motivated stunt, maybe we'll keep your stuff safe in the attic. This forced federalism is turning neighbor versus neighbor, state versus federal. Veterans and poor families saw their entire budget collapse. National Council of Nonprofits predicted massive strain on charities. People reported, we've seen scared faces every day at food pantries. No glib PR could erase that image, and sure enough, after courts ordered it, SNAP was paid, but the trauma lingers. Each day delayed meant overdrafts and desperation. This whole episode is especially absurd because SNAP isn't some luxury program. It's literally a program to keep people from starving. It's often temporary help, the safety net. The Trump admin threatened to pull the safety net away at a time of crisis shutdown. It makes you wonder if fundamental services, medicine, food, housing can be cut off like this for political leverage, what isn't sacred? So we've detailed the absurdity, the timeline, and the human cost. Now let's talk to you, the Americans listening. If you feel this is outrageous, or even if you're starting to realize it, what now? Would we accept this if the sides were reversed, if congressional Democrats denied Social Security or SNAP to Republicans? You know the answer. This is a litmus test of our values and vigilance. Ask yourself, are we going to let hunger become just another bargaining chip, or do we demand our leaders find common ground without using our neighbors as hostages? Will you tolerate excuses like the courts must fix it, or it's Congress's fault, or will you demand those in charge actually act responsibly? When the talking heads and tweets hit maximum spin, remember the real quotes. Shouldn't take a court order to force the president to provide essential nutrition that was Democracy Forward's Sky Perryman or Gov. Attempt to use the well-being of American citizens as pawns in their sick political game. These voices cut through the noise, reminding us feeding people isn't charity, it's bare humanity. We saw how states had to rush relief and how judges forced compliance. But next time, let's not let it reach a crisis. Demand your representatives work it out before families are starving. Ask why contingency funds aren't handled automatically and vote accordingly in future budget fights. Pressure companies and utilities not to cut off services when these stunts happen. Because otherwise, guess what? We'll all pay more in taxes, in credit card debt, in human misery. And on the moral front, we decide the standard we set. Do Americans want a government that starves families for sport, or one that treats food as a right, not a gift? It's a right under law. USDA policy explicitly said contingency funds should cover lapses until this admin changed it. Demand accountability and don't go hungry. So where does this leave us? Courts scolded the administration, states scrambled, millions of stamps hit EBT cards. Finally, the country breathed a sigh of relief for now, but the lesson should stick. Never forget who picked this fight, an administration that campaigned on big hearts and ended up showing none. It showed us what's possible when rule of law breaks under politics. It showed how close 42 million people came to losing one of few supports they have. And it showed the power of civic action, legal challenges, governor's interventions, public outrage forced the reversal. That's something to carry forward. If enough Americans care, Congress must care. It is our government, after all, not some separate realm. So if you're as angry as you should be, do something. Call your rep, share facts, volunteer at a food bank, and show this isn't normalized. Because, hey, if we accept food as pawn, what's next? Water, heat. The hypocrisy is breathtaking. The cruelty is preventable. The hunger is unjust. Love this rant. Hate it? Whether you're screaming amen, wondering, can this be real? Drop a comment. Don't just watch. Demand accountability. Like, subscribe, share, and let's make sure no administration ever treats food aid this way again. Your action is the court we trust. It shouldn't take a court order to force our president to provide essential nutrition, but since that is what it takes, we will continue to use the courts to protect the rights of people. So is Trump going to keep trying to play chicken with hungry kids? Will the Supreme Court do their jobs without more drama? We'll see. Meanwhile, keep watching and keep feeding America's conscience, because apparently somebody needs to. If you enjoyed this breakdown, smash that like button, drop your thoughts below, and make sure you're subscribed for more truth bombs. Because only by talking about this stuff can we make sure they never forget who they work for.